Nobody in the camp could say afterward. The exact moment the gold stopped being jewelry and became a god. It happened fast. That is the part that should frighten you. These were not strangers to the true God. These were the people who had stood at the edge of a sea and watched it stand up in 2 walls of water so they could walk across on dry ground. These were the people who had eaten bread that fell out of the sky every single morning. These were the people who 6 weeks earlier had heard the actual voice of God come down on a mountain wrapped in fire and smoke, so terrifying that they begged it to stop. 6 weeks. That is all the time it took. Their leader went up the mountain to get the words of God. He was gone a little longer than they liked. And the people who had seen the sea split apart melted their earrings in a fire and bowed down to a baby cow and called it the thing that saved them. And here's what I want you to understand before we go one step further, because it changes how you will watch everything else in this video. They were not stupid. They were not uniquely wicked. They were not some ancient, primitive people who believed silly things that you and I have grown out of. They were you. They were exactly you. On the day the thing you were promised takes too long to arrive, and something closer, something you can see and touch and hold right now, starts to look like a better bet than the God you cannot see. This is not a video about statues. This is not a video about ancient superstition. This is not a video about other people's mistakes. This is a video about the oldest, most patient, most personal trap in the entire human story. The one that caught the chosen people of God over and over again for 1,000 years. The one that the prophet screamed against until their throats were raw. And the one that I promise you is sitting somewhere in your own life right now, wearing a face so familiar you have stopped noticing it is there. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about idols. The most dangerous one in the Bible has no statue at all. We are going to walk through every god Israel ever bowed to. The calf, the storm god, the fertility goddess, the fish god that kept falling on its face, the furnace that ate children alive. And at the very end, after all of them have fallen, there is one idol still standing. It has no temple. It has no altar. You carry it with you everywhere you go. We will get to it, but not yet. For now, stay with me, because to understand why Israel kept doing this, you first have to understand what an idol actually was. And it is not what you think. When we hear the word idol, we picture a golden statue, and we feel a kind of safe distance from it. Nobody you know bows to a golden statue. But the Hebrew Bible has a whole vocabulary for these things, and the words tell you what was really going on. One of the most common words is pisel. It simply means a carved thing, a thing shaped by human hands out of wood or stone or metal. That is the whole definition, a thing you made. And the other word, the one the prophets loved to spit, is Elohim. It is a mocking word. It means roughly the nothings, the worthless ones. The Hebrew is almost a pun on the word for God, like calling them the godlets, the little nothing gods. When Isaiah and Jeremiah talked about the idols of the nations, they did not call them rivals. They called them nothings, empty. A scarecrow in a field, Jeremiah said, it cannot speak, it cannot walk, it has to be carried. because it cannot carry you. And that is the whole tragedy in one line. An idol is a thing you make, that you then need, that cannot do anything for you, that you end up serving. You carve it, then you carry it, then you obey it. The thing made by your hands becomes the thing that runs your life. Hold on to that, because you are going to watch it happen in escalating horror all the way down. Let me take you to the very first idol in a believer's house. And it is not a calf, and it is not a king. It is a woman you might not expect, slipping a set of little statues into her saddlebag and sitting on them. Her name is Rachel, the beloved wife of Jacob, the woman he worked 14 years to marry, the mother of Joseph. When Jacob finally packs up his enormous family to flee from his father-in-law Laban and go home, Rachel does something strange on the way out. She steals her father's teraphim. The teraphim were household gods, small idols, family idols, the kind you kept in the home for luck and protection and to lay claim to the family inheritance. Rachel takes them, and when Laban comes chasing after them, furious, demanding to know who stole his gods, Jacob does not even know she has them. He swears that whoever took them will not live. And Rachel hides the household gods under her camel saddle, and she sits on top of them. And when her father comes to search, she tells him she cannot stand up because it is that time of the month. So Laban searches the whole camp and finds nothing, because the gods of her father are underneath her the whole time. Now watch what this tells you. Here is a woman married into the family that carries the promise of the one true God, the family of Abraham, the family of the covenant, and she still cannot quite let go of the little gods of her childhood home. She wants the God of her husband and the gods of her father, just in case. And that right there is the pattern for the next 1,000 years. Not Israel choosing fake gods instead of the real one. Israel wanting the real one and the fake ones at the same time. A foot in both worlds. The true God for the big emergencies and the little idol under the saddle for everything else. That hunger never left them. And it is about to explode at the foot of a mountain. Go back to the calf now that you know what an idol is. Watch the scene closely because the details are devastating. Moses is up on Mount Sinai in the cloud, receiving the law from God himself. Down at the bottom, the people get restless. We do not know what happened to this Moses, they say, and they come to Aaron, Moses' own brother, the man who is going to be the very first high priest of Israel, and they say, "Make us gods who will go before us." And here's the part that should stop your heart. Aaron does it. The future high priest of the living God does not say no. He says, "Bring me your gold." He takes their earrings, melts them down, and shapes a calf out of the gold. And then, this is the detail that proves they were not trying to replace God. They were trying to shrink him down to a size they could manage. Aaron builds an altar in front of the calf and announces a festival to the Lord. The actual covenant name of God. They are not saying, "Let us worship a new God." They are saying, "Let us worship our God." But as this, as something we can see, as a golden animal we can dance around. They wanted the God of the sea and the manna, but they wanted him on a leash, in a shape, in a box. And when Moses comes down the mountain and sees it, it's a dancing, the calf, the altar, He throws down the tablets of the law and shatters them at the base of the mountain. The very first thing the law of God ever touched was the ground, broken in front of a golden cow. And then Moses asks his brother the question every one of us asks when we are caught. What did these people do to you that you brought such a great sin on them? And Aaron gives the most pathetic answer in the entire Bible. He says, I threw the gold into the fire, and out came this calf, as if it made itself, as if he just happened to be standing there when a cow walked out of the flames. Nobody ever takes responsibility for their idol. The idol always just sort of appears. That is your first god. A calf at the foot of the mountain, made by a priest who blamed the fire. But the calf was not the last time that desert generation broke, and the next time was uglier, because it happened with the finish line in sight. Near the very end of their wilderness years, camped on the edge of the promised land, so close they could almost see the hills of it. The men of Israel were invited by the women of Moab to the sacrifices of a local god, a regional version of Baal called the Baal of Peor. And they went. They ate at the feasts of the idol. They bowed down to it, and the text uses the language of a marriage to describe what they did next. It says Israel yoked itself to the Baal of Peor, joined to it the way a husband joins to a wife. On the doorstep of everything God had promised, after 40 years of being carried through a desert, they traded the inheritance for a feast and a foreign altar, and a plague tore through the camp and killed tens of thousands of them before it was finally stopped. Here's the part nobody warns you about, and it is the cruelest pattern in the whole book. The idol does not come for you in the depths when you are already on your knees and desperate. It comes for you on the doorstep, not in the middle of the wilderness, at the very edge of the promised land, when you have almost made it, when the breakthrough is one step away. That is when the feast appears. That is when the easier God, the closer pleasure, the thing right in front of you, looks like a reward you have earned. Watch for the idol that shows up right before the thing God spent your whole life getting you to. That is the one designed to keep you out of it. And it gets stranger because the next idol in our story is not one that Israel made. It is one Israel captured. And it would not stop falling down. There was a season, long after Sinai, when Israel was a mess. No king yet. The people scattered, the enemy strong. And the great enemy was the Philistines, a sea people with iron weapons and 5 great cities. And the Philistines worshipped a god named Dagon. Dagon was a big deal, a grain god, a god of the harvest, pictured in the form of a great figure, and he had a temple in the city of Ashdod with a massive statue inside. Now here is what happened. Israel, in a moment of spiritual stupidity, carried the Ark of the Covenant, the gold-covered chest that represented the very presence of God, into battle, like a good luck charm, like a teraphim under a saddle. And God let them lose. The Philistines captured the ark and they were thrilled. They carried it back to Ashdod in triumph and set it down inside the temple of Dagon right next to the statue of their god. The message was clear. Our God beat your God. Dagon is greater. Look, your God is a prisoner in our God's house. And then they all went home and went to sleep. The next morning, the priests of Dagon walked into the temple to do their morning rituals, and they found their god face down on the floor. The great statue of Dagon had fallen flat on its face in front of the ark of the captured God of Israel like a worshiper bowing down. They must have been baffled. They picked him up. They stood him back in his place. Awkward, a draft maybe, an accident. They went home. The next morning they walked in again, and Dagon was on the floor again. But this time it was worse. This time the head of Dagon and both of the hands of Dagon had been broken off and were lying on the threshold of the door. Only the trunk of the statue was left. The head, where a god supposedly thinks. The hands, where a god supposedly acts. Snapped off and dumped at the doorway, so that everyone walking in and out had to step over the broken pieces of their own God. Here's what most people miss in that story. The God of Israel did not say a word. He sent no prophet, no army, no fire. He simply sat there, a prisoner, in an enemy's temple, and the enemy's God kept ending up smashed on the floor in front of him without anyone laying a hand on it. That is the whole argument of this entire video, acted out in one dark temple. A real God does not need you to defend him. An idol is the thing that keeps falling over, that you keep having to pick up, that you keep having to repair and prop up and explain. If you have to keep rescuing your God, you have it backwards. That is not the thing that saves you. That is the thing you are exhausting yourself to save. A calf made by a priest, a statue that could not stay standing, and we are only getting started because the idols are about to stop being objects in a story and become the official religion of an entire nation. Before we go there, if this is landing on you, if you are starting to feel the weight of how close this hits, do the thing that helps this channel survive. Hit subscribe and leave one word in the comments. Just name the first idol that came to your mind when I said the last one has no statue. One word, I read them. Now, let me show you the day idolatry became national policy. The kingdom of Israel had finally become great under David and Solomon. One nation, one temple, one God in one holy city. And then it tore in half. After Solomon died, 10 of the tribes broke away under a man named Jeroboam, and only 2 stayed loyal to the line of David in the south. And Jeroboam, the new king of the north, had a political problem that he solved with the most catastrophic religious decision in the history of his people. His problem was this: the temple, the one place God had said his presence would dwell, the place every Israelite was supposed to travel to for the great festivals, was down south in Jerusalem in the rival kingdom. And Jeroboam was terrified. He thought, if my people keep going down to Jerusalem to worship, their hearts will turn back to the king down there, and they will kill me and go back to him. It is right there in the text. He reasons it out like a strategist. And so, to keep his people from traveling south to the true worship of God, Jeroboam made 2 golden calves. 2. He set one up in the city of Bethel in the south of his kingdom and one in the city of Dan in the far north, so that no matter where you lived, there was a calf near you. Convenient, easy, no long pilgrimage required. And he said to the people the words that should make the hair stand up on your arms, because they are almost word for word what Aaron's crowd said at Sinai. He said, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. The same lie, the same shape, a golden calf marketed as the convenient, local, low-effort version of the real thing. You do not have to travel. You do not have to do the hard thing. Worship here, close to home, on your own terms. And this is not just a Bible story floating in the air. Archaeologists digging at Tel Dan, in the far north of Israel, have uncovered the remains of exactly this: a massive raised platform, a high place, an open-air sanctuary built for worship, dated to the era of the kings of the north. You can stand at Dan today and look at the stone foundation of the very kind of shrine Jeroboam built to keep his people away from God. The convenient calf in the north has left its footprint in the dirt 3,000 years later, and from that day, the kingdom of the north never recovered. Every single king who came after Jeroboam is measured by one ruler in the Bible. Did he walk in the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin over and over, king after king? The convenient calf became the family business of an entire nation's downfall. That is what an idol does when you institutionalize it. It does not stay a private sin. It becomes the water everyone swims in, until nobody can remember the land was ever dry. But the calves were almost gentle compared to what came next, because a king was about to marry a foreign princess who did not just tolerate idols. She hunted down the prophets of the true God and tried to wipe them off the earth. Her name was Jezebel. Her husband was King Ahab. And the god she brought into Israel was Baal. Now you have to understand who Baal was, because Baal is the great rival god of the entire Old Testament. Baal was the storm god, the god of rain and lightning and fertility. And in a farming world, rain is everything. Rain is whether your children eat or starve. So Baal was the god you went to for the thing you needed most desperately. And his worship came with everything the human heart craves: ritual sex to make the land fertile, ecstatic frenzy, and an altar in every town. Alongside Baal came his consort, the goddess Asherah, worshipped with carved wooden poles set up on every hill and under every green tree. And here's how deep this syncretism went, how thoroughly Israel blended the true God with the false ones. Archaeologists found inscriptions at a desert site called Kuntilat Ajrud, dated to roughly the time of these kings, and the inscriptions bless people in the name of, well, and I want you to hear this, Yahweh and his Asherah, the covenant name of the one true God, paired with a pagan goddess, as if she were his wife. That is how far gone it was. They were not even choosing Baal over God anymore. They had married the true God to a fertility idol in their own minds. Rachel's saddlebag had become the national theology, and into that, God sent one furious, lonely man, Elijah. You know the showdown, even if you have forgotten the details. Elijah challenges the 450 prophets of Baal to a contest on top of Mount Carmel in front of all Israel, 2 altars, 2 bulls, no fire lit by human hands. Whichever God answers by sending down fire is the real God, and the prophets of Baal go first. And here's where you see what an idol does to the people who serve it. The prophets of Baal call on their God from morning until noon. Baal answer us. Nothing. They dance around the altar. Nothing. And Elijah, watching, starts to mock them. And his mockery is one of the most savage and important moments in the whole Bible. He shouts, "Cry louder." Maybe your God is deep in thought, or busy, or on a journey. Maybe he is asleep and you have to wake him up. The Hebrew is even cruder than your translation. He is suggesting Baal might be off relieving himself. The great storm god of the whole region, and Elijah is publicly asking whether he is in the bathroom. And the prophets of Baal, in desperation, do the thing the worship of these gods always demanded. They take swords and lances and cut themselves until the blood pours out of them, screaming hour after hour, trying to get their silent God to notice them. Pay attention to this because it is the heart of the whole matter. The false god demanded their blood and gave them nothing. They bled for a God who could not hear, who was not there, who never once answered. That is the going rate for an idol. It costs you everything and it answers with silence. And then Elijah simply rebuilds the broken altar of the Lord, soaks the whole thing in water 3 times until it is drowning, prays one short prayer, not screaming, not bleeding, just asking, and the fire of God falls out of the sky and consumes the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licks up the water in the trench. One God answered, the other never could, because one was real and the other was a nothing, an Elil, a worthless one. Now hold that image of fire from heaven, because we have to talk about how even the wisest man who ever lived fell into this exact trap, and it broke his kingdom in 2. I told you the kingdom split after Solomon. Here is why. Solomon, the king famous for asking God for wisdom, the king who built the temple, the richest and wisest man in the ancient world. Solomon collected wives. Hundreds of them, many of them foreign princesses from the surrounding nations, married for political alliances. And the Bible says with heartbreaking simplicity that when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart after other gods. The wisest man alive turned in his old age, not by an argument, not by a crisis, but by love, by comfort, by the slow daily pull of the people closest to him. And so Solomon built high places for the gods of his wives. He built a shrine for Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians. He built one for Chemosh, the god of Moab, and he built one for Molech, the god of the Ammonites. Did they yet, and remember that name, Molech, because we are coming back to him, and he is the worst of all of them. The man who built the temple of the true God spent his old age building shrines to nothings on the hills around Jerusalem, where you could see them from the holy city. And again, this is not a myth. There is a black stone slab called the Meshestele, the Moabite stone, carved around 840 years before Christ by a king of Moab. And on it, that king brags about his victories and gives the credit to his god, to Chemosh, the exact god Solomon built a shrine for. The stone even mentions Israel by name and describes taking vessels and dragging them before Chemosh. The gods in this story left their names carved in stone in the ground. They were real religions with real altars that swallowed real people, including the wisest king who ever lived. So let us count where we are. A calf at the mountain, gods under a saddle, a fish god that kept falling down, 2 convenient calves splitting a nation, a storm god that drank his prophet's blood, and the gods of 1,000 foreign wives turning the wisest heart on earth. And every one of them did the same 2 things. Every single one It promised, and it took. Stay with me, because there is one more God in the lineup before the darkest one, and this God was the most seductive of all, because she came dressed as devotion, as family, as baking bread with your children in a warm kitchen. Her name in the book of Jeremiah is the Queen of Heaven, probably a fusion of the fertility goddesses of the surrounding cultures. And what is so haunting about her worship is how cozy it was, how domestic, how it pulled in the whole family. Jeremiah describes it. The children gather the wood, the fathers light the fire, and the women knead the dough to make cakes for the Queen of Heaven. A family activity, grandmothers teaching granddaughters the recipe. And when Jeremiah confronts them and tells them God is furious, the people give an answer that is one of the most chilling things any human being says in Scripture. They tell the prophet, basically, things were better when we worshiped her. When we baked cakes for the Queen of Heaven, we had plenty of food and we saw no trouble. It is since we stopped that everything has gone wrong. Do you hear it? They had it exactly backwards, and they could not see it because the idol felt good. It felt like home. It felt like the good old days. That is the most dangerous idol of all. Not the terrifying one, but the comfortable one. The one that smells like your grandmother's kitchen. The one you associate with the times you felt safe. An idol does not have to scare you to own you. Most of them do not. Most of them just feel like comfort, like the way things used to be, like the warm thing you reach for when the real God feels far away. Here's the part nobody tells you about that warm, comfortable idol. It runs on the same fuel as all the rest. And to see what that fuel really is, I have to take you now to the bottom of the descent, to a valley outside Jerusalem, to a furnace, and to the screaming. But before we go down into that valley, and I want to warn you, the next part is the darkest in this video. Let me say one thing directly to you. If you have made it this far, you are not here by accident. Subscribe so the next one finds you. And ask yourself honestly, before we go down there, what is the thing in your life that you have started telling yourself you cannot be happy without? Hold that thought. We are about to find out what it costs. The Ammonites and the Canaanites worshipped a god named Molech. And the worship of Molech was the single most horrifying thing in the ancient world. And the Bible does not look away from it, so neither will we, though I will be careful with you. Molech was a god you worshipped by sacrificing your children, by fire. The book of Leviticus names it directly and forbids it. Do not give any of your children to be passed through the fire to Molech. And the place it happened again and again was a valley just outside Jerusalem called the Valley of the Son of Hinnom. In Hebrew, Gehinnom, and I want you to hold that word because of what it became. Gehinnom, the Valley of the Child Burning, was so synonymous with horror and fire and the place of the damned that by the time of Jesus, its name had become the very word for hell, Gehenna. When Jesus warned about hell, he used the name of a real valley outside the city, the valley where Israel had burned its own children to a god. Hell got its name from an idol. Now here's where the historians outside the Bible step in and confirm the unthinkable, because for a long time, skeptics wanted to believe the child sacrifice was just enemy propaganda. It was not. the Phoenicians and Canaanites carried this religion across the Mediterranean to their great colony at Carthage in North Africa. And in Carthage, archaeologists have excavated a site they call the Tophet. And in it, thousands of small urns. And inside the urns, the cremated bones of infants and very young children, buried under stone markers dedicated to their gods. Thousands of them. And the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus described how it was done in Carthage. A great bronze statue of the god with outstretched arms, heated by fire beneath, and the children placed on those arms to roll down into the flames. Diodorus says the parents were forbidden to weep, that flutes and drums were played loudly so the crowd could not hear the children. The drums were there to drown out the screaming. That is Moloch. That is the bottom. And I need you to see the logic of it, because the logic is the whole point of this video. Why would a parent do that? Because the idol promised. Moloch promised you a harvest. Moloch promised you victory in the war. Moloch promised you prosperity, a future, security, if you would just give him the one thing you loved most. Burn what is most precious to you, and I will give you what you want. That is the deal at the bottom of every idol. They had simply taken it to its most honest, most monstrous conclusion. Every idol asks you to sacrifice your children to it. Moloch just did it with literal fire instead of slowly, the way the comfortable idols do it. And the kings of God's own people walked their nation straight into that valley. There was a king of Judah named Ahaz, and Ahaz proved that a king will copy anything if he thinks it is working for somebody else. When Ahaz traveled to Damascus to pay homage to the king of Assyria, he saw a pagan altar there that impressed him. So he did something almost comic in its smallness, if it were not so deadly. He sent a detailed sketch of the altar, a drawing, back to the priest in Jerusalem, with orders to build a copy of it before he got home. And when Ahaz returned, he had the bronze altar of the Lord, the one God himself had specified, dragged off to the side of the temple courtyard, out of the way, and he installed his fashionable foreign import in the prime position, and he sacrificed on it. He rearranged the furniture of God's own house to make room for a design he had admired in a foreign capital. And the same chapter says Ahaz also took his own son and made him pass through the fire, copying the detestable practices of the nations. A descendant of King David, putting his own child in the flames of the valley. That is almost always how it works at the top. It is never a grand announcement that a king is abandoning God. It is a ruler who saw something sophisticated abroad and quietly slid God's altar a few feet to the left to make room for it. Nobody declares they're done with God. They just keep rearranging the furniture, politely, reasonably, fashionably, until one day there is no room left for him in his own house. And the most frightening part is how it ran in the blood 3 generations deep, like a current under the floor, because the idol-loving Ahaz had a son who became one of the greatest reformers Judah ever had. The king Hezekiah, who would tear the idols down, and then Hezekiah had a son. And that son took everything his grandfather Ahaz had started and everything his father Hezekiah had destroyed. And he did not merely rebuild it, he carried it somewhere no king of Judah had ever dared to take it. And the most heartbreaking thing in the whole Bible is that the people of God did this too. Not just the pagans, the chosen people in the valley outside the holy city. And it climbs all the way to the throne, to a king who took every single idol we've talked about and committed them all, and then did something no one before him had dared. His name was Manasseh, king of Judah, and he reigned longer than any other king in their history, 55 years of it. And the Bible says, Manasseh did more evil than the nations God had driven out before Israel. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had torn down. He built altars to Baal. He made an Asherah pole. He worshipped the stars. And then he did the unspeakable two things. First, he took his own son and made him pass through the fire. The king of Judah burned his own child to Molech. And second, and this is the moment the whole story has been building toward, Manasseh took a carved image, a pestle, an idol, and he set it up inside the temple of God, inside the holy place. In the one room on earth where God had said his name would dwell, the king of God's people stood an idol of a nothing God. That is the end of the descent. It started with a calf at the foot of a mountain, outside, far from God's presence, and it ends with an idol standing inside the Holy of Holies. The idol had walked over 1,000 years from the camp at the bottom of Sinai all the way into the throne room of God. Step by step, calf by calf, comfortable cake by comfortable cake, until it was standing in the one place it was never ever supposed to be. And here's the thread I started pulling at the very beginning, finally coming loose. I told you the most dangerous idol has no statue. Watch where the idols always end up. Not in a temple in some far-off land. In the holy place. Manasseh did not put the idol in a field. He put it where God belonged. And that is what every idol is reaching for, not a spot in your life, but the throne of your life. The center. The place only God is supposed to sit. The idol with no statue is the one that has quietly climbed up off the hillside and into the holiest room you have, your own heart, and sat down on the throne, and you have stopped noticing it is there because it has been there so long it just feels like you. This is not a story about ancient people. This is not a story about gold and wood. This is not a story about a valley you will never visit. This is a story about the one chair at the center of you and what is sitting in it tonight. But I promised you that after all the idols fell, there would be hope. And there is. Because the story of Manasseh does not end with the idol in the temple. God let an army come. They put a hook in the nose of the king of Judah and bound him in bronze shackles and dragged him to Babylon. The most powerful man in his world, led away by a ring through his face like an animal. And there, in a foreign dungeon, in the dark, the worst idolater in the history of his people finally hit the bottom of everything his idols had promised and never delivered. And the book of Chronicles says that in his distress, Manasseh humbled himself greatly and prayed to the Lord. And God gave, this is almost impossible to believe. God heard him and brought him back to Jerusalem. And the first thing Manasseh did when he got home was tear out the idol he had put in the temple and throw it out of the city. The man who carried the idol into the holy place was the same man who carried it back out. There is no one, hear me, there is no one so far gone into their idols that the real God cannot reach down into the dungeon and pull them back. If God brought Manasseh back, the door is open for anyone watching this. And there was one more king who showed us what to do with an idol, even when it is wrapped in holiness. Manasseh's father, Hezekiah, did something that took unbelievable courage. Centuries earlier, when the people were dying of snake bite in the wilderness, God had told Moses to make a bronze serpent and lift it up, and anyone who looked at it would live. It was a real thing God commanded, a genuine instrument of His mercy. But the people kept it for centuries. And slowly, the bronze snake that had once saved them became a thing they burned incense to. A holy object turned into an idol. And when Hezekiah became king, he smashed it. He destroyed the bronze serpent that Moses himself had made, that God himself had commanded, because the people were worshiping it. And the Bible records the brutal little name he gave it as he broke it. He called it Nehushtan, which means roughly just a piece of bronze. That is all, just a hunk of metal. He looked at the most sacred relic in the nation, the thing everyone treated as untouchable, and he said, "It is bronze. It is a thing." And he broke it. Here's the gut punch in that. And it is the thing I most need you to carry out of here. Your most dangerous idol is probably not a sin. It is probably a good thing, maybe even a gift God genuinely gave you that has crept up onto the throne. The bronze serpent was a true mercy that became a false god. Your idol might be your family, your work, which is a good thing, your health, your reputation, your savings, your child, your ministry, the version of your life you were sure you were owed. Hezekiah's courage was to look at the holy seeming thing and tell the truth about it. It is just bronze. And to break it before it broke him. So look hard at the chair in the center of you, the thing you reach for the second you wake up, before you have said a word to God, the thing whose absence would feel like the end of the world, the thing you would, if you were honest, sacrifice almost anything to keep. That is the one with no statue. That is the Elil, the nothing, sitting in the seat of the living God. And it is doing to you, slowly, with comfort and fear, exactly what Molech did in the valley with fire, taking the most precious things you have, one at a time, and giving you silence in return. And there is one last thing the idols do to you, the most frightening of all. And an old song in the middle of the Bible says it in a single sentence. The book of Psalms describes the idols of the nations the way Jeremiah did. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see, ears but cannot hear, hands but cannot feel. And then it lands the blow. Those who make them, it says, will become like them. So will everyone who trusts in them. You become like what you worship. That is the law running underneath this entire video. Whatever sits in the chair at the center of you, you slowly turn into. Worship a deaf, blind, silent thing, and you go quietly deaf and blind and silent toward the people who need you most. Worship money, and you grow harder and colder and more frightened, the way money is. Worship your own image, and you get emptier and hungrier and more anxious, the way an image is. Worship your resentment, and you become it. The idol does not only take from you, it remakes you slowly in its own dead likeness until the people who love you are standing in front of a person who is gone as still and unreachable as a statue. The calf worshippers grew as senseless as the calf. The Molech worshippers grew as merciless as the fire. But that same law is also the door out, and this is the hope buried inside the warning. Because if you become like what you worship, then worship the living God, the one who sees and hears and speaks and weeps and bleeds, and you slowly against everything become like him, alive, awake, able to feel again, able to love. The chair at the center of you is not only deciding what you serve, it is deciding what you turn into. Let me give you 3 things to carry out of here tonight. And the third one is the one I actually need you to hear. The first is just the fact, and you can hold it up against every god in this video and check it for yourself. An idol always does the same 2 things. It promises, and it takes. From the calf to the cakes to the furnace, not one of them ever delivered, and every one of them collected. They cost Aaron his integrity, the prophets of Baal their blood, Solomon his kingdom, the people of Hinnom their children, and Manasseh his freedom. The idol always presents itself as the thing that will finally make you safe, and it always turns out to be the thing that is bleeding you dry. If you want to find your idol, do not look for what you love. Look for what you are afraid to lose. The second is what this means for you, right where you are sitting tonight. You do not get to be the one person in human history without one. The chosen people of God, who saw the sea split, could not stop. The wisest man alive could not stop. The most sacred object in the nation became one. So the question was never whether you have an idol. The question is only whether you can name it before it does to you what it did to all of them. Name it tonight. Say it out loud. The naming is the first crack in the bronze. And the third, the one I want, ringing in your chest after the screen goes dark. Every idol in this video had to be carried. The calf, the teraphim under the saddle, Dagon picked up off the floor, the cakes carried to the fire. You make them, and then you spend your life carrying them, and they never once carry you. But there is one God in this whole story who was never carved, never melted, never shaped by human hands. And instead of being carried, he came down and carried you. The idols all demanded a child in the fire. The true God gave his own son to the fire instead so that he would never have to ask yours of you. Molech said, "Give me what you love most and maybe I will bless you." God said, "I will give you what I love most, and I already have." That is the difference between a nothing and the living God. One takes your child. The other becomes one and dies in the fire in your place. So here's what I actually want from you, down in the comments, and I read them. Of all the idols in this video, the calf, the household gods, Dagon, the 2 calves of Jeroboam, Baal, the queen of heaven, Molech, which one are you most surprised to find a version of in your own life? And what is the name of the one with no statue, the one sitting in your chair? Be honest. You would be amazed how many people are about to confess the exact same thing in that comment section and find out they were never the only one. Because here is the last thing, and then I will let you go. The whole Bible is the story of a God prying his people's fingers off of nothings that were killing them, one idol at a time, for 1,000 years. Not because he is jealous in the small petty way we are, but because he watched the things they bowed to take their gold, their wisdom, their kingdom, and finally their children, and give back nothing but silence. He was never trying to take something away from you. He was trying to get you off the arms of a furnace that was about to close. The idol with no statue is still standing in you tonight. But the God who could never be carved is still reaching into the dungeon. And the only thing he has ever asked you to do is the thing Hezekiah did to the bronze, and Manasseh did in the dark, and Israel could almost never bring themselves to do. Get up off the saddle, name the nothing, and break it before it breaks you.